So I think in honor of everyone's time, we'll get started. Thank you for coming this afternoon. The focus that we're going to be talking about is looking at how the E-Rate program covers cybersecurity investments. My name is Keith Kruger, and I have the honor of running COSIN, the National Association of Chief Technology Officers. And what we're going to be talking about today is really in three parts. The first part, I'm going to turn this over to John Harrington, from the CEO of Funds for Learning, who's going to talk about a joint study that we've been working on, a cost model around E-Rate cybersecurity. The second part will be a panel of heads of technology, CIOs, CTOs from around the country, to try to give us some kind of real world grounding. And finally, we'll turn to Reg Lechty, our legislative counsel, who's going to talk about how we're going to use this study with the FCC and when we're releasing it. Just to give a little context of this topic, first of all, the topic of cybersecurity, we do a national survey, not just of COSIN members, but of all heads of technology. Look, if everyone could mute themselves if you're not speaking. We ask, what are the top issues facing heads of technology across the United States? And cybersecurity has been the #1 issue for the last 3 years. So this is a big topic for our community. A year ago, COSIN, with the support of the Superintendents Association, AASA, and the Business Officers Association, ASBO International, filed with the FCC to say that cybersecurity was a growing, dramatic problem for learning, and it largely was not covered by E-Rate. And we did a survey of 100 school districts and submitted the ever-increasing costs that school districts were bearing. The FCC, really in a bipartisan way, indicated that they were sympathetic to the concern, but they really wanted more information and data in terms of what the cost implications would be to cover cybersecurity more comprehensively. So that is the purpose of this new study. And what the purpose of the panel is to ground us in the reality. So with that, I will turn it over to John Harrington. And John, I think you have some separate slides that you'll want to present.
Great. Thank you, Keith. And thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to take you through the methodology, the foundation for the cost estimate that Keith mentioned. I will assure you that there is quite a bit more information and detail. So for those of you that are so inclined, there are tables and tables of spreadsheets and data that we can share with you. And indeed, the information that will be presented to the FCC includes a great deal of that information. As Keith said, the topic is estimating the average annual E-Rate funding necessary to help protect K-12 networks, keep them accessible and secure for students, teachers, and administrators. The executive summary of this report, it's fairly straightforward. We looked at 3 levels of security, firewalls. Let's see, I think I may have stopped sharing my screen just a moment. Okay, there we go. We looked at 3 levels of security, firewalls, anti-X services, and then user-centric security. And we'll define those a little bit more for you. In essence, the prices for each of these types of services depend on the level of security, the size of the applicant, and also, of course, we see fluctuations in pricing based on the vendor or manufacturer that is providing the particular service or hardware, software, and so on. The prices that we estimated were calculated on a school by school, applicant by applicant basis. and then tallied for all of the K through 12 schools that currently participate in the E-rate program. When we look at all of that range of security features for all of those schools, the total cost to the E-rate program to cover all of those types of goods and services would be $2.39 billion each year. Now, if we break that down a little bit more, you'll see that additional support for firewalls only would add about $750 million each year, $740 million. That would, for that level of support, require an additional Category 2 budget cap of $81 per student to provide. That's the 5-year Category 2 budget cap to provide support for firewalls. So now I'll kind of jump into a little more detail for you. Our basic methodology started by providing or receiving funding information from leading manufacturers of cybersecurity goods and services. We received detailed pricing models from 3 leading manufacturers, and we use those to calculate the cost for every school in the United States. We, as I mentioned, used the E-rate funding data that we have, the enrollment information, as well as other NCES statistics to calculate the number of students and to estimate the number of teachers and staff that are in each school so that we could accurately estimate the cost of the various goods and services. We looked at the cost to provide each layer of service as sort of an incremental addition to the security services that were available. So we would look at firewall only costs, and then we would add the anti-EX and then the user authentication and other services on top of those. So we could look at what it would cost to provide these various incremental levels of security. And then finally, we'd sort of average all of that out and then estimate based on the E-rate discounts of each applicant what the E-rate funding cost would be for those goods and services. It's important to take a step back and remember the eligible services framework that the E-rate program has operated within really essentially from the beginning of the program. The E-rate is intended to support the goods and services that are necessary to connect students in their classrooms, as well as library patrons. Network security is now a necessary function for that reliable access. What many of us call next generation firewalls are really today's basic firewalls. And things like network management and monitoring, these are no longer optional types of services, sort of extra nice bells and whistles for a network, but really what we see is firewalls with the current range of services that those encompass, and network management and monitoring tools. These are all part of the basic requirements for a network to be accessible, up and running, so that students can access information, that information is secure. The E-rate program has a long history of sort of adapting to the shifts in technology. For example, I remember in the first application cycle, schools, libraries applying for network hubs. And of course, those were quickly replaced with network switches. And then in the early days, there were 802.11a Wi-Fi access points. And now, of course, can't even keep up with what letter we're on of access points. So we see in other areas of the program a shift, a continual movement with the technology that exists today as the standard, and for the E-rate program to provide support for that. We have not seen that similar type of transition with firewall and other types of security. And so our basic premise here is a firewall today that you purchase has, even though the current interpretation of the E-rate eligible services list excludes some of the goods and services from that firewall, really, in essence, that is the basic firewall for today. To calculate our costs, there are a few important things you need to understand. Number one is we have come at this entire analysis with the assumption that we don't want to take away from the goods and services that are currently being funded. We see that there is strong demand for on-premise networking equipment. The Category 2 program has been a resounding success, and we don't see any need to take away from the goods and services that are currently being funded. So we are approaching this as an additional amount of funding, an additional level of support for schools to encourage cybersecurity. The costs that are being presented today are based on goods and services from a third party. In essence, items that have some sort of SKU or a barcode associated with them. It's hardware, software, in some cases, cloud-based services that are providing cybersecurity. Most of these are licensed, in which case we have built the model based on a 5-year license. The cost model does not include certain elements that definitely have a cost associated with them. Things like network downtime or ransomware, data backup, recovery, design, consulting, school staff. These are all important costs, real costs, and we recognize that any discussion about cybersecurity must take into account those factors. However, for purposes of the E-rate program and looking at a model that we believe the E-rate program could support, we have taken those items and set them aside and not included them as a part of the actual E-rate funding request calculation. Now let's talk about the conceptual model itself. A topic like cybersecurity can be very difficult to define. In many ways, it encompasses so many aspects of a network. It's hardware, it's software, it is how users interface with the network, and there's a whole host of items that fall under the category of cybersecurity. For purposes of this model, we've really broken it down into 3 distinct elements that are cumulative and build upon one another. And each one of these adds a little more security, a little more protection to the network itself. Next generation firewalls, again, are the bread and butter now of network cybersecurity. They don't look a lot like what we saw 10 or 20 years ago. They provide many more sophisticated types of protection, such as intrusion detection and so on. But these are the frontline security next-gen firewalls. From that, we see additional types of security measures, commonly referred to as anti-X, things like antivirus, anti-spam, anti-malware. Again, we include this with the recognition that that there are malicious software now that can come in to a network and take that network offline. And so guarding the network from these types of attacks has now become a mission critical piece of just keeping that network up and running. And then finally, advanced types of services. These are the sorts of goods, services, features that authenticate users. They look at not only a user's identity, but where they are accessing information from. They can filter or block certain traffic. They can provide authentication services. If you get a text on your phone when you're trying to log into a system, those types of goods and services. And those we've lumped into what we are calling advanced plus cybersecurity. All right, now let's talk about the costs themselves, what you came here for. When we look at the next generation firewalls, we estimate a total annual expense of a little more than $2 billion, $2.03 billion. And that would include items that are currently eligible for E-rate discounts. When we subtract what is currently eligible, we see an additional net cost of $1.04 billion to provide full support for basic firewalls, next-gen firewalls. This would result in a maximum E-rate funding request of $0.74 billion. For that second layer of support, the anti-X services, the average annual expense for those services would be $1.23 billion, resulting in an E-rate funding request of $0.87 billion. And then finally, for the advanced services, the multi-factor authentication, blocking, and so on, we estimate an overall average annual expense of $1.1 billion. And that would result in E-rate funding requests of up to $0.78 billion. This chart sort of illustrates how that all fits together. You've got the next gen firewall, the additional cost associated with fully funding firewalls, adding to that the endpoint security and then the advanced plus security. Together, those total $2.39 billion. Now I'm going to provide a few slides with a little more detail just to kind of show our math a bit. The current E-rate program has 21,107 applicants. That is a total of about 53.99 million students. We estimate 3.36 million staff supporting those students for a total of 57.35 million users. So our overall cost model is built on this 21,107 applicants accessing the internet from 119,502 sites and a total of a little over 57.35 million users on those networks. The costs I mentioned were calculated based on pricing from a variety of manufacturers. This chart illustrates the range of the costs that we calculated for those manufacturers for the various services. For example, the first column you'll see on this chart represents the cost for next generation firewalls. Remember, the average cost to the E-rate program we estimated would be $0.74 billion. That is the average of the three vendors' costs that we were provided. On the low range of the costs that we calculated, we saw about $300 million or $0.3 billion. On the high range of that, it went up to $1.1 billion. And again, the average of the three was at $0.7 billion. If you go over one column, you'll see the costs associated with not just those firewalls, but also the anti-X, referred to it here as endpoint security or anti-X security. The average there being $1.6 billion per year, ranging anywhere from $0.7 billion up to $2.6 billion. And then finally, the third column represents the total cost for these three levels of security for schools. And the total cost ranging anywhere from 1.1 billion all the way up to 3.7 billion, with an average in the middle there of about $2.4 billion in additional costs for the E-rate program annually. Just to kind of give you a sense of how these expenses break down on a per student basis, this chart will show you that the costs for the next generation firewall on average per student is $37.59. So on the far left there at the bottom, you see $37.59. That is the average cost per student for a next generation firewall. And then you can add to that the anti-X security, the endpoint security, and then the advanced security. The total of that is $80.69 per student. And then as you sort of work your way across this slide, you see the pre-discount cost that's not currently funded by the E-rate program. Remember, a portion of firewalls are considered eligible today. And then finally, the amount of funding additional, the estimated E-rate funding request per student for these various levels of security, starting with $13.63 per student. And these are all annual costs. And well, I want to quickly highlight something else for you that we saw in our study that I think is very important. And that is that the annual expense per student varies dramatically based on the size of the school district or the entity that's applying. So on the left of this chart, you'll see that for a single school site, on average, we estimate the annual cost per student is $145.69 for the comprehensive suite of goods and services we've discussed here today. As you move to the right on this slide, you'll see that the cost drops dramatically to the point that when you're looking at entities with 50 or more school sites associated with them, that price has dropped to $63.82 per student. So when we were looking at the results of the data and really trying to pull out what were the factors that really drove the model, what variables really impacted the results, the size of the entity itself was one of the most dramatic factors in calculating the cost for a particular school district. And really what this means is when you can look at scale, when you're talking about volumes of licenses, volumes of hardware, the number of students that you have, the size of the entity really matters. So if you are looking at a large school district or a regional or even state level consortia, you can really anticipate that there will be significant savings for the applicant that's submitting those funding requests. So while the E-rate program, of course, provides discounts and it's a good source of support, always looking for ways to save money is important. And I think the most effective applicants in the future will really be looking at ways that they can leverage volume in their cybersecurity acquisition. This slide here actually shows you the estimated Category 2 budget that's necessary to support these levels of security. If you fully support firewalls in the E-rate program, we estimate that you would need to add $80.53. We've rounded it up to $81 in our report, that you would need to add that to the 5-year Category 2 budget to adequately support firewalls without jeopardizing support for other goods and services. Remember, again, that Category 2 demand has been robust. Applicants have really been utilizing that for data, other data needs, data wiring, data cabling, wireless access points, and so on. And an important component of this entire discussion is not just funding, adding firewalls fully to the eligible services list, but also providing additional support for them. So if we add full support for firewalls, we estimate that it would require that 5-year Category 2 budget be increased by about $81. You can see here the additional levels of support result in either an additional $175.83 or $261.55. So the bottom line here is if you were hoping to provide all levels of security to students, that it would require $262 per student in additional Category 2 funding over that 5-year budget cap. And with that, I'm going to step away from the mic and turn it over to you, Keith.
Thanks, John. It's really a terrific piece of work, I think, that you have led, and thank you for certainly from COSIN and for the community. One thing I should have said at the beginning of the webinar, but let me clarify, we are not releasing this study today. We are giving you a sneak preview today. We will be releasing this and filing it with the FCC in just a little over a week. And that is because we're waiting for the new administration, the new FCC to take over so that it's clear that this is in their bailiwick. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we'd ask that you not share this on social media or anything quite yet. We're just making you a little VIP preview. With that, we want to invite a panel. We've talked, we kind of dove into the details, the real substance, but I think we want to now kind of step back and say, well, why is this important? Why should the public care? Why should policymakers like those at FCC or members of the administration or Congress care about this? Why is cybersecurity important for learning? So we're going to pull together a panel, and let me just say that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, just this fall put out an alert that K-12 is the #1 public sector at risk for ransomware. We've also seen alerts every spring from the IRS the last few years that phishing attacks, because school districts are often major employers. So this is certainly something that is getting the attention of experts in the field. And to help us today, we've got a panel of experts, and we're going to hear from Ken Thompson, Dr. Ken Thompson, the CIO, San Antonio, Texas School District, Rod Brousseau, who's with school district in Illinois, Derek Root, the CTO from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools in North Carolina, and Deb Kettering from Rockwood School District in Missouri. And I think I'll turn it over to Ken to go first. Ken, you not only, of course, came from San Antonio, but before that, were the CIO in Baltimore City. So I'm curious how this affects large urban school districts and why it's important.
Thank you, Keith. In my humble opinion, I think it has a tremendous impact on districts across the country. Like many of us during this pandemic, in San Antonio, we had a 5-year strategy already in place to go one-to-one. But when March hit us, we went from a fleet of roughly 50, 60,000 devices to roughly 80, 90,000 devices, truly going to a one-to-one district. And as John was talking earlier, my primary focus prior to this was 110 facilities. But when those devices went home, the endpoint protection became more than important than ever before, because now those devices are deployed outside of our environment, so that endpoint protection becomes even more vital to the overall security posture of the organization. So the overall, and I'm often asked what keeps me awake at night, and security is one of those components, because like many of my colleagues on this panel, here in San Antonio, we're not a 24-hour organization, but the bad guys are. So meaning that my security team, a team of 2, works 8 hours a day, supposedly. But we have to keep an eye on our environment 24/7. So this conversation, I think, is critical to not only here in San Antonio, but to all of our districts across the country.
Thanks so much, Ken. And Ken, when you were at Baltimore City, I think they had a major attack, wasn't it?
We did. In Baltimore, we had a serious phishing attack. And again, it is no fun. It is no fun. Again, and again, I would suggest that our weakest element in most districts is that end user, the end user training, the end user ensuring that they are aware, because these guys, and oftentimes the communication that comes through, even for me, makes me look twice as the CIO sitting in my seat. It is very convincing in many situations. So that end user training, and in Baltimore, that's exactly how it came in, as spam. And you click it and it saturates and it's set dormant in your environment and you don't know where it is. But we was fortunate in Baltimore that when it penetrated our environment, we caught it early, we caught it quickly. It attacked the payroll, those Bitcoin. So we dove deep into that situation. We were proactive, and knock on wood, and again, we were just fortunate that we were not held at anyone's hostage to ensure they would pay. But yes, those situations, and all of us are vulnerable. I say often, if you want to get into the house, they can get in. But my job is to slow them down, or at least quickly identify once they get in, because in Baltimore, we had roughly 12,000 end users, 12,000 end user devices, just talking staff. Student population, 80,000. Here in San Antonio, 48,000 end user devices, 7,000 staff. That is a huge risk factor, especially considering that end user, the role that they play in keeping our environment safe.
Thanks so much. Boy, the numbers are staggering. And, I think I get a lot of questions from the media. Well, what would school districts have that's even of interest to cyber criminals?
Oh, wow.
Go ahead.
We're data rich, Keith. I think, they say often we're not compared to a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America, but we are data rich. The amount of data that a K-12 institution have, the bad guys would be glad to lay their hands on it. I would suggest to anyone, we have a tremendous pool or inventory or warehouse of data that's invaluable. The bad guys would be that they target. And as you stated earlier, I believe that's one of the reasons that K-12s have been targeted. The risk or the a number of attacks have elevated to the level that it has because of the richness of what they want to get to in our environment.
Rod, what's happening up in the Chicago area?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I'm Rod Rousseau, the Director of Technology and Information Services here at District 99. We're about an hour west of Chicago. We're a suburban high school district, so we have about 5,000 kids in 2 buildings. Been one-to-one for about 6 years, and we're in a 40% E-rate group. Boy, I could just agree completely with and just restate everything that Ken just said as well. Just the exponential growth. I've been in this role almost 25 years, so obviously I've seen a lot of growth. And when I've charted out for board reports and things here, for example, even just the internet growth from the beginning, it goes like this, and then it's like a rocket launch. The amount of access that we have and need, the mission critical nature of technology. We're not a 911 call center, but it sure feels like it. The complexity of what we have to support, and for many of us, the lack of staffing. We don't have a security staff. We all share that. And for us, there's an element, or for me, there's an element of due care. We're providing such wide, massive access to these mission critical, valuable resources. We need to, in parallel with that, have optimum security to go along with that, whether it's denial of service protection, the firewall protection, the endpoints and such. I think anything less than that is a dereliction of duty on my part. It's just so critical. And the cost that we're seeing, not only of providing those safeguards and services, but mission critical, the mission critical element of our business is learning. And just even a short, and Lord forbid, a long disruption of that is just so costly in terms of lost learning. We're frequently denial of service attacked. We fortunately have mitigation protocols in place now, but I can tell you when we didn't, it was quite easy to lose a day or two of learning and of access. Ransomware was mentioned earlier. We haven't been attacked yet in a large way with that. Neighboring districts have had catastrophic experience with that, losing in one case weeks and months of access. So yeah, I would completely agree, Keith, that just that robust security just has to accompany the robust bandwidth and technology that we use to provide and serve these mission critical learning needs.
Yeah, our national survey that COSIN does with AASA, the Superintendents Association, found that only 1 in every 5 school districts had one full-time equivalent position working on cybersecurity. So there's a real lack of human capacity to deal with this. And we, your point about the loss of instructional time, Miami-Dade was, and Fairfax County, they were, and Clark County, they were attacked and not able to open at the beginning of school because of this. So let's turn to Deb. Deb, your district, tell us a little bit about that, because I think it reaches out even into rural areas. Oop, I think you're on mute.
Sure. Yeah, Rockwood School District is in suburban St. Louis, Missouri, and we're the 2nd or 3rd largest district in the state, depending on the week and attendance counts. But as Keith said, we are also significantly rural in some of our areas, with no broadband service available and limited cell service available. So it's been really challenging to deal with that. And so there are some other E-rate considerations with that aspect. But one of the things that we see, we have 30 schools, and like Rod, we're a 40% discount district. So while we don't get a lot of E-rate funding compared to some other districts near us, that money that we receive is a game changer for us. And if we could include any cybersecurity tools in that, it would be very beneficial for us, because we have, 22,000 or 26,000 devices going home, with all of our staff taking devices home as well. We have 26,000 devices going home. So endpoint protection that's mobile and attached to devices, but also loss prevention type things would also be helpful. We are very basic with our cybersecurity right now, because we are funded by bond for the most part for any kind of infrastructure, hardware, software. And it's voted on every few years. And so we're very limited. We tend to utilize free products from our vendors, which are not always as robust as we need. And therefore, if we could recoup some of the cost for some of these tools, it would be really helpful for us. The other piece of this, I know I just echo everything that has been said so far, but one of the things that keeps me up at night is we are reactionary. We are constantly reacting to situations because we don't have the people or the tools in place to allow us to be proactive in many instances. We don't have any network team that has expertise in cybersecurity. So we are all learning as we go. So there are a lot of things, but I just feel like the premium anti-X endpoint protection would be very helpful for us as threat detection, et cetera. We have had just recently, several area districts have been hit with ransomware. They are very small districts, and believe that that is why they were chosen, fly under the radar. And we're looking for multi-factor tool authentication tools. Those are some things that we feel would be very helpful. So having those tools available through E-rate would be helpful for us.
Great, thanks, Deb.
So thank you.
And last but not least, at least for a quick introduction, I think we'll have some time for some conversation with all of you. Derek Root, it's a very large district, Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Tell us a little bit about your district and what you're seeing in North Carolina.
Sure, thanks, Keith. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek Root. Excuse me. I am the Chief Technology Officer here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are a large urban, suburban, and rural school district because we encompass not just the city of Charlotte, but the surrounding county around, which is around 2 million people or so. So we have about 150,000 students here. Endpoints, my gosh, yeah, I manage around 200,000 endpoints between staff and students. So it is an ever-present job. I will say I disagree a little bit with my good friend Ken about the fact that we're not Wells Fargo. I can see Wells Fargo outside my window, and I can see Bank of America outside my window, along with a lot of other corporations like Lowe's. And the reason those companies are here is because Charlotte is not really well known amongst a lot of people who aren't here, but we are the second largest banking hub in the United States. And so I feel strongly that those companies are here because we are working hard to provide an educated workforce for them. And if those students leave my district with their identities compromised, we've lost the cybersecurity war in corporate America before we've even started, right? So I feel strongly that cybersecurity amongst our students is so important, and it's not being recognized that if these students again are compromised, they lead directly into life that way, and it's so hard to dig yourself back out. We struggle with the same things a lot of you do. Now we're very fortunate in North Carolina that we're a very progressive state from a technology perspective. The governor, several governors have put it high on the list I get my internet access, for instance, from the state. So the state provides internet access to the entire school system, district or statewide. And with that, we get services like anti-DOS services and Akamai and upstream content filtering. So there's certain things we don't have to focus on. So we really can put our efforts here into the local. But just like you've heard from several of my colleagues, and Deborah said it really well, we're funded locally for things like anti-phishing and cybersecurity, endpoint protection. Those things are all local, not unfunded. We're funded by the county government, but it's sort of the same effort. So we don't have a decent multi-factor authentication system that is centrally deployed to everyone in every system. We have a lot of work to do there. User compromise is a constant problem for us. I'm sure if I could get a show of hands that almost all of you have seen this at some point, but I've had to turn systems back off that I used to run because of compromised users having paychecks diverted and W-2s compromised and things that I used to allow to happen off net. I now have to stop and make you do it on net. This year in particular, that's going to cost me a lot of money because W-2s are coming out. And one of the things under my purview is business systems. Well, now I'm printing W-2s and mailing them as opposed to just letting people get them from home like they used to do. And that's all as a direct result of phishing and compromised user accounts. So Ken, I could ramble on all afternoon about that, but I'll shut up with that because I know everybody suffers through a lot of these same problems.
Well, I think living in Washington, I'm not sure that a lot of policymakers fully understand what districts are really facing. In this report, we're going to be making the argument. Of course, we along with all the education community, have argued that access to the internet is about digital equity. We're going to be arguing in this report that safe access is a digital right. And something that we really have to focus on, and that it's appropriate that the E-rate, which historically has been about access and now broadband and Wi-Fi, needs to extend this logically around making sure that we have safe access. So I'm kind of curious, does that resonate with any of the panelists?
Absolutely, Ken. It certainly resonates with us. I mean, safe access for our students. I mean, everybody has read the stories about the Zoom bombing and things like that. Well, those incidents are happening as a direct result as a lack of end user training, right? People are jumping into platforms and tools and not understanding the ramifications and the ideas about how to use that tool safely. And as a result, our students are being exposed to, and in the case of Zoom bombing, it's often pranks, but often they're very vulgar and impactful pranks. But you know, those pranks can be escalated in other areas. And so safe access could not be higher on my list of priorities right now.
I would agree as well, Keith, and I would expand it a bit. Not only safe access, but access, period. In San Antonio, 90% of my student population is free and reduced. And we was fortunate enough here to lay our own WAN. We have our own dark fiber WAN, but I cannot use it because many of our students do not have access at home. So what we had to do here in San Antonio, we dip in going into an area that I am not familiar with at all, is LTE. I have two networks here, one for LTE and one the district, because I could not connect the families to my district network because it is paid for by E-rate. So I believe that those policies, procedures need to be looked at. Yes, safe access, the content filtering, but access, period, for us here in San Antonio, ensuring that our students, again, all of our students were remote for about 5 months. And, you know, we have 25% of our student population back now, but ensuring that those students had access when they was remote. The safe and access, period, would be key issues for me.
So last question, and then we'll turn it over to Reg Lechty to tell us how we're going to proceed. But is the problem, how much of the problem is cyber criminals and how much of it is students or faculty that are attacking your network?
I think in our case, a lot of it is students trying out skills they've learned.
Right.
With our students working remotely, We've actually had fewer issues because our internet service provider does provide some level of DDoS protection coming into the district. Where we had a lot of our issues was when something would be launched from inside the school aimed at another school in the district. And so it never went out. But we've had fewer, but yeah, that is definitely an issue for us.
I think for us that, yeah, students, when it comes to the denial of service attacks, it's so easy to just pay for that now. And we definitely have had a number of those cases. What keeps me up at night, I think, though, is more the outside attacks, the more sophisticated attacks. Again, knowing that we're a data-rich environment, that's what keeps me up at night.
And Derek, you were sharing with us in the prep call about just how cheap it is to do those DDoS attacks for students. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, for sure. I shared a video with you. I think, Keith, that we could post that video of
Yeah, please do.
these DDoS attacks for sale for a few bucks a minute or a few bucks an hour. It's cheap. I do agree with Rod that I think the bulk of our threats now are more either that sort of a threat or the external, the gift card scams are off the chain right now. We've had so many people attacked by those and fallen victim to those. And again, that all comes around end user training, and that's a program that is just not well developed, I think, in a lot of school districts. That end user training, and it's the proactive end user training, not just like buy a video and post it to Safe Schools, but that proactive where we track who's taken it, we look who's fallen victim, we target those users and go after them. And that's what we're so desperately in need of.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. I think we're seeing that particularly in remote learning with students and teachers at home, they're often distracted. They're clicking on phishing attacks. They're not realizing what's at risk. And so with that, I'm going to thank you and turn it over to Reg Lechty, who heads up our policy efforts, to kind of tell us a little bit about how we're going to use this report and what we're going to do with it.
Thank you, Keith, and big thanks to Deb, Derek, Rod, and Ken for putting a face on this problem that we know from the surveys that Keith described is not just confined to your districts, but really facing every district in the country. And the immense costs and risks associated with lost learning time when networks are down, the risk to student data, of course, the risk to personnel data. We heard a little bit about W-2s, and of course, the sensitive personnel data that can be used for identity theft, and of course, the potential cost of ransomware attacks. So thank you for coming on today to help us understand why the investment that John described at the beginning of the presentation is so necessary. I'll be brief. We just wanted to kind of share with the community how COSIN and the organization's partners hope to use this data to take the conversation in Washington a step forward. I think many of you probably read about the very serious attacks on federal agency systems just a couple of weeks ago, and we're expecting cybersecurity to be a major point of conversation both on Capitol Hill and at the FCC. Our first stop, though, with this information will be the Federal Communications Commission. Keith mentioned in his introduction that at least 2 of the FCC commissioners, as part of the Category 2 E-rate rulemaking, suggested that it was vitally important for the agency to collect additional data about this challenge. And we think that this new report will be of great interest to them, especially as the new administration starts. And our intention is to share the report along with some policy recommendations for the agency. And I want to just flesh those out for you briefly. And the first is one that we think is important from the perspective of reframing this debate. And John Harrington talked a little bit about this, but our view is that you cannot truly have best-in-class broadband connection unless that connection has adequate security. This sort of idea of speed as the isolated variable in determining whether or not broadband is being delivered equitably to our students is dated. It's not consistent with engineering of these networks, and it should not be perceived differently in policy. So we're going to be pushing on policymakers at the FCC and in the Congress to say broadband has to be defined as both speed and security. And that's a real kind of different way to approach this, but I think a best-in-class understanding of where we are in terms of the educational needs associated with broadband, but also ensuring that our students and teachers and networks are protected. And that will extend itself to everything the FCC does in broadband policy, including annual broadband reports that should henceforth, measure connectivity and security. And that we think that's very timely as the FCC undertakes this new broadband mapping initiative that Congress has required and paid for now in the last couple of weeks. So we hope that idea of security and speed will be the baseline for measuring broadband moving forward. Second, we think the E-rate, as we've talked about, needs to begin helping districts with this part of the connectivity challenge. And so we would call on the FCC to direct USAC to treat all firewalls for the purposes of the program as basic, beginning for fiscal year 2021. And then connected to that, based on the analysis that's reflected in the report, asking the agency to put out an NPRM that would increase the 5-year Category 2 budget cap by the $81 per student estimate that John described. And then quickly, I know we're coming to the top of the hour. This is a multifaceted problem that's going to require a multifaceted solution. So we need this work to happen at the FCC in relation to the E-rate program. We also need Congress to take some policy steps as well, beginning with providing some direct investment through the annual appropriations process in the human element of this challenge. We've heard each of our panelists talk about the human component, and kind of consistent with the legislation introduced last Congress by Congresswoman Matsui and Congressman Langevin, establishing a grant program that would invest in non-infrastructure component of this challenge. And then lastly, a couple of ideas centered on the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency. This idea that we need to do a much better job of gathering kind of voluntarily information about attacks on K-12 networks so that the proper authorities can also be brought to bear in combating these problems that are not only national but global in nature. And so would call on Congress to take that Matsui-Langevin language around a CISA registry and pass it as part of hopefully some other broader focus on cybersecurity that will be encompassing state, local, and federal government as well. So more to come from COSIN as this kind of year unfolds. We'll soon be rolling out the report and these recommendations for the FCC and Congress, and appreciate having a chance just to talk to you at a high level about them today. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Reg. I think that's such an important point that, the E-rate is clearly the most important funding source today for school districts around technology. So we got to get this right over at the E-rate. But there are other bigger additional opportunities that need to be pursued from a policy perspective if we're going to get serious. And that means that Homeland Security that supports states and local governments, but really right now isn't supporting very much most K-12 school districts, has a big role that could play. So that'll be forthcoming. So I want to thank everyone for being here. And if there is, let me see if someone has any questions. I don't really see a question, so I think we will. Trying to make my slides go forward, but they're not going forward.
There is one comment when Hemsworth shared concern about the contribution factor and the potential impact of increasing the Category 2 budget cap and how that would play in with the contribution factor. So Reg, you could jump in on this, but I would just say that there's multiple components of this. One is, of course, just the eligible services list itself. And, I think that from an E-rate perspective, getting cybersecurity recognized as a critical component of a network is job one, day one, to recognize that just like an operating system for a switch is required, that having cybersecurity on the eligible services list. And of course, we can make an argument that it is today with firewalls. So the immediate step that the FCC could take that would not impact contribution factors or anything would be simply to recognize firewalls as eligible, period. And that would be a step in the right direction. Long term, however, there is this discussion of if that support comes then at the expense of other support. If a school now has this sort of terrible choice to make between cybersecurity or wiring a school building, that doesn't necessarily move the state of infrastructure forward farther. So, I anticipate that there will be discussions about the contribution factor and other things related to USF. For purposes of this study, we were really looking at, what would it take for the E-rate program to provide this support, and if the Category 2 budgets were adjusted to address them, this is what it would take. Sort of an opening position, if you will.
Thanks, John.
And I reserve my right to amend comments later.
Reg, any last minute comments you wanted to make?
Only we hope we can kind of partner with all of you that recognize this challenge in the year ahead. It's a tall lift to help policymakers understand this issue, and they best understand it if they hear from constituents and people they trust from home. So thanks for taking time to learn a little bit more about the report, and we'll be happy to follow up on any questions you think of after you hang up.
Great. And I put up a slide we'll, of course, in addition to filing this resource in the next week or so, encourage you to consider taking part in our virtual conference. Go to the website, cosinconference.org, and there will be updates on policy on this issue and others. We also have some professional development for school districts. Amy McLaughlin, if you're on the call and can jump in and tell us about that cybersecurity workshop that's coming up.
I can, I'm on the call. Yes, on February 2nd through 4th, we have a workshop called Cybersecurity on a Shoestring Budget. So it's all about how to leverage your budget to the max to get as much security as you can out of it. And then we have another event coming up in April, which is on it's incident response and planning and running an incident response experience for your district.
And you can find information on the COSIN, the main COSIN website, cosin.org. And last and finally, we have a Gates grant, which now for the next 3 years, we will be doing an annual national report looking at all 50 state legislatures, as well as federal policy. That report will come out very shortly for the past year. And of course, we'll also be monitoring what's happening in the coming legislative sessions. With that, I want to thank everyone. This has been a terrific conversation, a lot of great information from our CTOs. And thank you, and have a great 3-day weekend if you're celebrating Martin Luther King Day. Thank you.